This episode contains explicit discussions of child sexual abuse and related trauma. It may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the Fronczak Files. I'm Tracey Hastings.
And I'm Paul Jack Fronczak. Today, we listen as Logan opened the door to a childhood marked by abuse, systemic failures, and the kind of trauma no child should ever endure. And now, he's faced with a question no brother should ever have to ask. Is the brother he grew up protecting actually his biological son? So, Tracey, say hello to Logan.
Hello, Logan. I'm Tracey Hastings, and I'm the co-host of the Fronczak Files.
Hi, Tracy. And Jack. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so I guess we just want to dive in and let's learn about you. So tell us what's been going on. You and I met way back in 2018, and I've heard little pieces of your story since then. But tell us where you are now.
Oh man. Well, Logan Gifford today is a 26-year-old husband and expecting father. He's married to an incredible wife named Tiffany Gifford, who's a awesome photographer as well. Currently, I'm a corporate trainer with a nonprofit with several years of political experience. About 13 years in the industry. Born and raised in Las Vegas, very, very proud local and native. And you and I did meet way back in 2018. We had a bunch of mutual friends together. Um, I'm actually quite familiar with Jack's story. I read his book in less than 24 hours.
You
So I
did.
was
Yeah.
I was ferociously attacking him at dinner and asking him about his like Indian friends from the book and just oddball questions because I like knew every nuanced detail because I was so fascinated with his story. And I gotta say, the reason why I'm on the show is in large deal due to me reading your book, sir. And I'm not trying to, blow smoke up your butt here, but um,
Yeah.
I know that you're not, because I was the same way with his book. I couldn't put it down. Read it cover to cover, so I get it.
All right. That's enough.
right.
You're already on the show.
Well, right. Well, being the son of two parents that lived in foster care, I didn't really have a sound sense of identity. I didn't know my grandparents like that. And your question of, well, like you got to that point and did the DNA test, I felt not entirely the same, but I definitely said, wow, I don't know enough. So I actually started my own family tree and did a deep dive through family search and ancestry. And I was addicted for like a month. I was at every 24-hour computer lab in the city putting together my family tree, trying to figure it out. So I just wanted to say what a prolific impact you've had. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you. So basically, you and I have always talked about, living the truth. And if you don't know the truth, it's really hard to move forward, and you certainly can't look back. So has this been a quest for you finding the truth?
Yeah, well, the quest originally began um, in a multitude of ways. It started off with not fully knowing where we came from, right? So that's sort of when the bubble started for me. But to add some more context to my case, for those that may not necessarily be familiar, and I'll do my best to be as respectful as possible here. And you guys do have questions, I'm more than happy to answer it. But that started in late 2008. Unfortunately, they lived very disheveled lives here, right? So, um, my mother eventually came forward that she was pregnant after the sexual assault started to take place. And during that pregnancy, she had multiple health issues with it. She was also actively abusing alcohol, being promiscuous, actively abusing methamphetamine. And unfortunately, this is a culmination of systemic failures here. Okay. The culmination of systemic failures started when this child was born because there was no fetal alcohol or toxin testing that took place. Uh, Allegedly, and again, take my story here with a grain of salt because I was a child at the time, but uh, we were going to sue the hospital that gave birth to him because allegedly my Munchausen mother claimed that her insurance ran out and they never actually forced a emergency C-section. So she was in labor with this child for 3 days, and he was severely deprived of oxygen, being restricted by her birth canal. He popped out at 8 pounds 4 ounces and immediately received early intervention services. So this pregnancy was a rough and tumble one. Um, during all of that, we found a manifesto of her claiming to want and run away with one of my father's coworkers at the time, and she was going to leave me and my middle brother to my father, Theodore, and she was going to go off and start a new life with this child because she knew that there was no possible way my father would be the biological father. She got caught. We found a cell phone with text messages to prove it. And um, after she was caught red handed, she tried to physically terminate the pregnancy as well, several times. So this child came into this world stumbling, unfortunately, and all of the signs were there. Fast forwarding, I had confided in my therapist what it was going on. This abuse took place over 7 years, and we started a legal proceeding. Um, I apologize. I'm actually going to backtrack there to add into some of the things. Going back to his birth, she eventually bowed out, if you would, and said, okay. And my parents agreed mutually that his middle name would be Theodore, and we were never to question this again. That was the family consensus. And that was his single act of defiance, saying that this is my child. I'm going to mark him with my name. So that was his paradigm. And I hate to say it and to clarify, he was culpable and complicit in all of this. He knew when it took place. My father was there the first night it happened. And ironically, you're right. He was there the first night it was happened. Jack, if I accused you of the things that I've accused my father of or came forward with, the first thing I would have expected anyone to do is say, I didn't do it.
Right. You would
Absolutely. That
think.
would be an innocent person's response would be that I did not
I
do that.
did. So it is hard for me to sit here and say this on the show, but he's never called back hard. And that's why, I mean, he tried to deny the DNA test today in front of Judge Ochoa because he was vindictive and he was making some outlandish claims, and we'll eventually get to that. But um, when I was a child, that's how we were expected to deal with that situation. Um, Early on in his life, the young boy needed stints underneath his feet to walk. He had his own cruising cause of a language. He started to see a speech pathologist before the age of 2. I mean, my goodness. And like he couldn't say Logan for the longest of time. So my name to him was Lilo. He struggled with day-to-day activities, and he's personally told me it feels as though he has to try 3 or 4 times as hard to just keep up with day-to-day activities. I mean, 11 months ago, Jack, he learned how to tie his shoes for the first time.
How old is he now?
15.
And if we could go back just for a second to when he was born, I'm a high risk obstetrical RN, so I take care of women having babies every day when I'm at work, and I've been doing it for about 18 years. And that is a routine test that is done when it is suspected that the mother has done some type of illicit drug, that we test babies for that. So you're absolutely right. That was an institutional failure, that no testing was done on this child. Uh, even if a parent declines to be tested themselves, we can test the umbilical cord of the baby for drugs and alcohol because that umbilical cord belongs to the baby, not to the mother. And so the fact that that wasn't done, and I'm guessing it was pretty obvious that she was a user. That was a huge error on their part.
And I hate to say it, both of them were phenomenal drug addicts. It was their specialty. It was their favorite pastime.
I'm sure. And when you do my job long enough, you can see them from 100 paces. You know who it is, who does that, and so we know that it wasn't like there was a question. I'm sure, was she or was she not?
Right. And this is, I mean, it was no secret. I mean, the drug abuse in my household was at face value. It was in front of me. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, there was one party I went to with a bunch of my father's friends. I was about 6 years old, and they started, performance surgery on swishers, as they called it. And they went outside, smoked a bunch of weed, and I came back, and one of the party goers started to scratch a quarter-sized hole in his foot because he was tripping so hard on ecstasy, and he was bleeding, and he was fingering his foot. And I was brought around that because my mother at the time worked graveyard, and my father was a, fast talking, fast money making, um, I think it's fair to say misogynistic, spousal abuse. You know, he was in that lifestyle and he liked the women, and it really unfortunately started to come from both ends. But that's the level of drug addiction. And from an early age, I really was able to deduce the better qualities out of those people because that was like my guidebook to surviving, right? I said, okay, my father may be X, Y, and Z, but he's charismatic. Let's hold on to how charismatic he is. You know, Martin's a good fellow, groomsman at my wedding, around a lot of parties with him. But I took his work ethic. That's what I took away from him. So I ignored the bad and I tried to capture the good. And it was hard and it was trial and error sometimes, but I knew not to touch any of the stuff. I wasn't curious in that regard. I stayed in the corner and I was thankful when they bought me toys or books and I kind of kept to myself. Um, Outside of that, I mean, it exposed me to the travel and tourism business out here in Las Vegas. Well, my father was a beer vendor. Okay, so I used to go to work with him sometimes, and I'd go to the Thomas and Mack Center when UNLV basketball was really good. No offense, running Rebels, but when we were like in the Sweet 16 era when it was a sold out show. Um, my father would leave me in the student section and he told an usher to watch me and he'd go to work. And I'd see him 18,000 people in this huge arena, crowds roaring, people are spilling beers, and my father's on the other side selling beer, water, and peanuts to these guys. And it wasn't obviously the safest thing to do, but but I mean, that was my childhood. It was,
Sure.
popcorn and beer and feeling like the VIP of the Thomas and Mack. It was definitely a different childhood for sure, and it wasn't all bad. Would I repeat some of the things again? Probably not. But, feeling like you're 8 years old and you could, peg out on cinnamon glazed almonds and pecans or go and get some Dippin' Dots ice cream.
And you need to hold on to those happy memories because, and it might sound strange to the listeners, like really, beer and popcorn, yeah, because what you know is speedballs and and alcoholism. This is a happy memory, right? This is something that you can hold on to.
Yeah, you throw in Dippin' Dots, it's going to be a good day.
That seals the deal,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Absolutely, man. That cookies and cream was killer. But um, things started to take a turn. The major CPS case that kind of threw everything sideways was surrounding the drowning of my youngest sibling. So, June 30th of 2012, my family and I we went to the Walmart and bought a $400 above ground pool, right? One of those 3, 4 foot tall ones, and we came back to the house. We started to set it up. And to put into context, this is 2012 in Las Vegas. So peak housing recession. You know, times are tough. Times are really tough. We were living with my grandmother. Her second husband had died. Um, I had already been homeless at a point where I was thrown out of that house originally by my grandmother and missed half of the fifth grade. And we wound up couch surfing with some coworkers and figuring it out. Then so I was like 11 or 12, I want to say. The middle brother, Aaron, was born July 25th of 2003. You know, he's like my right hand guy at this point in my life. He's my Peter, as I call him, right? My rock. I confide to him in everything, like JFK and Jack, right? And Bobby. Um, then there's the child in question with the litigation, and then my youngest brother, Liam, who was born after that child on June 15th of 2010. My grandmother and my aunt and my cousin all live in this house. It was a three-bedroom house. And we didn't have enough space, so we converted the garage, cold as hell during the summer. I mean, cold as hell during the winter, hot as hell during the summer. No insulation. So I say all of that just so to set the scene. We're setting this thing up. We're, in my opinion, ghetto trailer trash white people. And I say that with love, but that's what I would identify my family as. And we're all shirtless, no sunscreen on, and Pizza Hut outside, baking in the sun, setting this thing up. Um, and we start to fill it up, and the two little ones are playing in the pool. Aaron and I are spreading our thing out, you know, trying to be sure there's no rocks. You know, takes forever. Great day overall, though. You know, it was all of us brothers outside. We're excited for summer vacation. We would usually have a bunch of kids over, and we'd play in the pool, start whirlpools and things like that. RKO each other off of the ladder, just boy stuff. Um, that evening, I was asked to go and check on the water level of the pool, and I put in the filter. There's a huge hole in the side of the thing if you don't screw in this filter, right? So we're gonna leave the hose running overnight. I tied the filter through the ladder into the pool. That was that. I went inside, um, and things started to go sideways, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm just putting myself back there in the moment. And my parents had that back room closest to the pool, so in the back far corner of the house. And they had two ways into their room through the hallway, obviously, and then they had an outdoor entrance as well to go immediately outside. And next to that outdoor entrance was their room. Um, and that evening, I was sexually assaulted in front of both of my parents. My father was complicit and encouraged it. And a bunch of things happened that night involving drug paraphernalia. I was asked to do certain things with some of that paraphernalia to my mother in a sexual way as well. It was, and unfortunately, her predator profile was really a couplefold. It was controlling because it was Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So that was already a vice to begin with, right? On top of that, there was a style of fear. She was a a a more masculine woman, big forearms, flat fisted. I mean, she held her own. She had been arrested twice for domestic violence, so there is a real violence aspect to it. And um, you know, on top of that, she was also a victim herself. Both of my parents were.
Logan, once again, how old were you at this point?
I was like 11 or 12, man. I was born in 1998. And this was June 30th of 2012. I was getting ready to go into high school.
For those listeners who might not know what Munchausen by proxy is, would you like to explain that to them?
Yeah, Munchausen by proxy recently made a resurgence of recognition due to the Gypsy Rose case, but Munchausen is or at least it was exhibited in my mother by controlling our medical records. You know, she would shop for both of my parents would actually shop with us children for medications and things like that, and made us sick. I Early on in my life, I had actually overdosed on sulfa-based medications, went into anaphylactic shock because of Munchausen syndrome, and almost lost my life because of it.
Yeah, it's essentially, yeah, like when a parent is abusing their child to get attention for themselves, they will make their child sick to the and sometimes beyond. In my hometown where I grew up, one of the first documented cases of Munchausen by proxy was made the national news there, and she was actually killing her babies as a way of garnering sympathy from the people around her. How sad it was that she was losing all of these babies. She ended up getting convicted and going to jail. It's a real medical condition that parents have. It's real.
Yeah, so that happened, and I went to bed, and I was sad as shit. I mean, simply put. So the next morning, I wake up to my father yelling across the house for me to go outside and check the water levels in the pool. So I open the door, I go outside, and I notice that I see Liam's blanket. I see a diaper. I see his shirt. I turn the corner and he's face down floating in the pool. So I ran over and I pulled his hair because that was the first thing that I could reach. And I picked him up out of the water. And, I'm screaming for help. And I lay him down and I start CPR. And my mother takes over CPR. So I went inside and to call 911 because no one's called 911 yet. And, in the whirlwind of all of that, I was like, wow, like if this is rock bottom, this is it. Um, the paramedics came quickly, and thank the Lord. Um, they gave my mother an incredible big boot to the spine, which actually shattered her back and placed her on disability. On top of her spina bifida, she was kicked, and I mean, she fell over in some pain when they reached over her to give that child, and um, she was whisked to the hospital with him. Um, Theodore, his response was to start putting on a bunch of clothes and thinking that he's going to jail, and that's all he could say to us kids. Said, "I'm going to prison. I'm going to prison." Aaron, I don't care. I'm going to prison. And he put on 4 or 5 pairs of socks, different outfits, and he was ready to go. Um, So obviously, Metro gets there. They start their investigation, trauma therapy. The whole news was there as well. They camped outside of our house for 4 or 5 days because the story was that, teenager finds brother lifeless in backyard pool. Um, I managed to slip away from the chaos because I wanted to myself. I ate a bunch of aspirin, probably like 25, and locked that bathroom door, drew myself a warm bath, and I was gonna sit in that tub and go. And it felt like I was in there for about 2 hours, guys, because I mean, I hate to say it like this, but maybe if they weren't doing that with me, they would have heard something because he got out through the doggy door, according to the reports. And he was in that water for 6 hours.
What was the access to the pool? Was there a ladder in it? How did he get in there?
There was a bunch of shit in our backyard. He just put it together, different laundry tubs or, toys. I don't remember exactly what he used to climb in, but he stacked some stuff up and toppled in there.
So when they found your brother, was there any kind of investigation or they just say it was open and shut?
Well, that was the pinnacle. That was the detraction between my parents. The reason why I bring that up is that was the major CPS case. Where if it should have been caught, it should have been caught in this one. And this is again a systemic failure of the child protective services systems, not necessarily looking at it from a male survivor perspective. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the statistic currently is 1 in 6 men. So that's 28 million men almost annually every year that are sexually assaulted, and that's just the portion that choose to openly report it. So what's actually the true statistic here?
Do you think there's any foul play involved?
The Metropolitan Police Department at one point asked, and at the time we said no. Um, at the time, we genuinely all believed and understood what had happened. But as time has gone back, I've oftentimes wondered. And, only two people could really tell us that, right? And one of them's not here right now. So, and if I'm being honest, knowing the type of Munchausen my mother has exhibited, she has no reason or rhyme to defer from any of that specific story. I mean, Jack, I received one letter from my mother when I sent her to prison, and it wasn't even an apology. She said that she told me in this letter, dated, I want to say it was April of 2021, I received it, that she lives with a clean conscience and has found God. He was given 3 shots of adrenaline and came back, and he lived in a vegetative state for 15 months during the CPS investigation. So full trach, gastric tube, paralysis, limited mobility, seizures, you name it. Needed a nurse or a CNA. So this fed her Munchausen syndrome. Oh my God, was this a gift?
Yeah, I was just about to say that she was reveling in this, and that also the hospital staff should have been aware. Pediatric units, pediatric ICUs, with they're taking care of children like this. We're trained to be on the lookout for parents like this, and so spending 15 months in a hospital and nobody questioned that. Nobody thought that she had unusual behavior, or this little boy who's living with brainstem activity only, and she's there, reveling in it. That should have been pretty obvious.
Tracey, she had enough gall to change the trach by herself one day up on a 3-day bender with meth, and he's coughing blood in my face.
She should have been removed from the hospital immediately when she did that.
Well, this was at home in front of us kids.
Then he should have been taken out of the house immediately after that. That is unacceptable. No, nobody that is not trained to take care of a trach should be touching it. And it also sort of feeds into that Munchausen thing too. Like, I wonder what would happen if I did the trach thing. Would that make the situation even worse?
I gave my mother the greatest gift of all, which is the gift of having her baby back. And that's how we wind up here. But this isn't Liam's thing, and rest in peace to him. It's been a long time. He was an incredible child. I'll kind of touch off his story with this. When he did pass away, again, uh, the coroner's report came back and said that it was related to the drowning, and that's the official cause of death, which didn't. I don't know. He went into the emergency room for an infection, which he didn't go into the emergency room because he drowned again.
Secondary infection. Yes, secondary to his vegetative state.
Then they came to the house and they found mold on his medical bed rods, and the room was unclean, and yeah, it was bad. But it was violence if we crossed that threshold. But he donated his eyes, he donated his liver, and I want to say he donated something else as well. So he was a very proud organ donor. In his memory, I became a Shriner. Try to actively work with children that need help, and that way no child has to go through what he went through and his legacy lives on in those actions. I was a very proud bone marrow donor with the Gift of Life registry. So I did that in his honor, and I've tried to live a very active life in giving after his passing because he was that sort of kid. I mean, he used to come home. This is total boy mom stuff, but he used to come home with flowers or different flowers and weeds, and he'd come and give it to you, and I'm just sitting there crying and thinking about the day I'm going to have to walk him down the aisle as an older brother, right, and gonna watch this boy get married. And he was just such a loving human being, gentlest soul ever. um but during all of that, I was still being sexually abused, and the case got extended twice. What I mean by that is that they willingly gave dirty urine to keep the case open. After the drowning incident, we had to be supervised. My parents weren't allowed to be in the same room with us alone. There had to be a third party witness on the record at all times. And yet we were never removed. Again, perfect predator profile, Munchausen, drug addiction, DV, impoverished, low education, no resources. The writing was on the wall, and I am the schools, CPS, the lawyers, the cops, and that's why I came out and I wanted to share my story. Because how do we fix this? I'm not lamenting this and crying over my spilt milk here, but like Tracey said at the beginning, these are chronic institutional failures.
I agree 100%. And you never told, did you ever tell anybody what was going on? Any outside parties, friends, anybody?
Um, yeah, the honest answer in that is no, because I thought I was keeping it at bay. I thought it was just me. And then I learned it wasn't. So she had a really good job of keeping us so isolated. And I thought I knew everything that went on in that house. But this was maybe 18 months ago. My brother had confided in me that, he had some similar experiences, and I'm not going to disclose what he has gone through because that's his story to tell. But at the time, I thought I was the bearer of the cup. I thought this was my cup alone, and I had to figure out a way to get out of this because I was a perfect parentified son. My parents didn't do parent things. I paid all of the bills with their debit cards. They were functionally illiterate. So if I stopped, the flow of the house was gonna, up, and I was gonna be the whipping boy. So it's like, okay, how do I circumvent all of this and try to plan my escape? And my parents made this fear of us going into foster care a very prevalent thing because they were abused in foster care, okay? And knowing that their story and how much they hated it, that they ran away, I didn't want to wind up there because that didn't sound appealing to me or safe at the time. So it was like, well, how do I deal with this? Unfortunately, how do we get the bad apple away? And we have to do this one piece at a time here. And I'm 12, 13, 14 years old trying to get out of this spider web here that I didn't create, but I had to create at the same time because if I didn't, the resources and everything were going to go away.
That's a huge weight for a young kid to carry.
For anyone to carry. In 2015, you finally reported it, right?
Well, she ran away for the last time and said she didn't want to be a parent anymore. My mother looked at us in the face and said, I'm done, and walked away. And she allegedly in the letter said that she lost a piece of her soul after my youngest sibling had passed away. And I'm not sitting there denying that there wasn't any sort of peace, sure, but she wanted to live a drug addict lifestyle. Remember, she was like 19 or 20 years old when she had me. My father came out to Las Vegas on the run from Massachusetts, running from warrants, got off on a Greyhound, and was avoiding the law. 19, 20 years old, fast life. She was supposed to be a Disney animator. She was an incredibly talented artist. And I share some of her other qualities, like I said, because it wasn't all bad. And I've forgiven her to a certain extent. But she said that she didn't experience at life, and she wanted to go and party and do a bunch of drugs with her boyfriend at the time, so she walked. So I told my father. Now keep in mind, I've lived with my father the entire time. Now I have to say, okay, well, if she's gone, I go and confront him, and I'm like, look, I told him this basically straight up, and this is the most that we had ever spoken about that situation before the trial. I walked into his room. I said, I'm going to tell my therapist, Ryan, I need you to shut the up and let me handle this. Because I needed him. If I threw him under the bus with Doreen, because my father never physically touched me. He would encourage it. He would say it's hot. He coached it. He never physically touched me though. So I went to him and I said, don't worry about it. I'll handle it. And he knew what I meant. He knew what I meant. And I told Ryan the next morning, and I started emergency therapy, and that's when the case was open and when I began the process of taking my mother to trial.
And how old were you at this time?
I was a senior in high school. I was like 17.
What did that look like when that all started to come out? What did your life look like then?
It was everyone else. I don't want to say people were shocked. People were shocked that I didn't say anything, but they weren't surprised. My Most of my family hated my mother. Most of my father's friends hated my mother. I, for a long time, really hated my mother. She wasn't, the most desirable person to be around for very obvious reasons. No emotion, lack of empathy. Tracy, to give you an example, she used to push me away when I tried to go up and give her a hug, like coming home from school, like full on NFL stiff arm.
And the harm that does to a growing child when this is the person who's supposed to be taking care of you. This is your caretaker, the person you're supposed to look to for your safety and your protection. And you had to be afraid of her.
Yeah, and on top of that, she was very mentally abusive as well. I mean, belittling of my weight issues. I mean, when I graduated high school, I almost got up to 450 pounds. I was a huge kid, like very obviously, I think I do a pretty good Jelly Roll impersonator if you ask me. But uh, you know, it's it was rude. It was rude, and even she would verbally demean the hell out of my father and all of us. I mean, she would come in arguments in front of us kids.
So Logan, when you finally decided to say something, and then what charges were filed against your mom?
Yeah, 12 life sentences. She 12 life sentences was the beginning of it. It got bound over to the 8th Judicial District Court. And I was out a crazy amount of days. The first time I was deposed, I was on the stand for nearly 3 hours. And I recounted every which bit of it. At first, unfortunately, I think the judicial system looks at it with a bit of skepticism coming from a young man. uh, Her defense attorney maintained her innocence throughout the entire case and said that it was my bias against my mother, that my father had coerced me to come and do this. And that was all not true whatsoever. In fact, I basically forced my father to agree to do it, actually, because he didn't have a spine and something needed to be done. Um, I had actually, I mean, it was ridiculous. It was completely ridiculous at some points, but I sat there and I explained it. And unfortunately, at the time, and this is no disrespect to the prosecutor, Miss Collins, but I wish the Alford plea that my mother took would have better explained to me a little bit because I was fully ready to go to trial. We made it up to voir dire. They were going to panel a jury. We were going to go and do all of this. And I was told, well, she's taking this deal. It's a good deal. Lifetime registration as a sex offender. But they've watered that down out here, guys. Lifetime supervision. My mother doesn't have an ankle monitor on her ankle right now. She has no civil rights restrictions other than having to register as a sex offender, and her address is public record. But she could go and be at a park.
So your mom's out of prison now?
Yeah, she was actually in front of me today over Zoom. I didn't expect her to actually appear at the court hearing today, but she did. She made an appearance. She filed in response to that my paternity case. But before I jump down that rabbit hole, if I may, I just want to prelude this saying once I sent my mother to prison and she took that 8 to 20, I asked my family members and my therapist, how should I go about getting this looked at? Because I want to also begin to say, let's not forget all of the challenges that had to go through developmentally at this point. He had stints under his feet, teaching him how to walk until he was 5 years old.
Whose care was he under at this time? If your mother was in jail, and who had legal care of him?
my father, and then my father went into a coma for 2 years. So like August of 2017, he was like in and out of a coma. He spent a lot of time in the hospital. His health took a crapper after that case. So I'm 18 years old, fresh out of court, just graduated high school in August of graduated 2016. I had one poor semester, and then August of 2017, my dad goes into a coma for nearly a year, and it was rehab center. He had contracted sepsis, had a couple of blood clots. He was 450 pounds, 480 or something. He was huge. He was not taking care of himself. So full-time student, middle brother still in high school, younger brother just got into elementary school, goes into middle school, full IEP on disability, and I'm also living with my schizophrenic grandmother. That was my spring semester of college.
And you passed your classes?
I did my absolute best during that time. The university knows how I did, but um,
Well,
it
good for
was a
you,
rough
man.
go of it.
I'm
It was
surprised
a
you made
rough
it.
go of It was a rough go of it. I mean, it was just when life has just dealt you the deck of cards that, I mean, you just got to sit there and smile sometimes and just laugh at the absurdity of it. It was challenging. It was definitely challenging, but it built the character and the testament I have today. I think back to those times. I didn't know if he was going to live or die. I didn't know what to do, but I said, the world still spins, right? We still got to walk forward somehow. And um, at the at the same time, just because one person was taken down in the family, I still had to lead. But when kids weren't watching Ted, they were watching me. They watched my every step. And I said, well, I need to go on and show them how, we deal with a loved one. And I used the loved one very loosely, but how someone goes down in the family. You're supposed to still do your job, and it takes a team effort. And look, if I told them my grades weren't slipping, I didn't expect their grades to slip. Let me do the work. That's my job.
So, Logan, I have to ask you. So, you said that your mom had like 8 or 9 life sentences and now she's out. How did that even happen?
So she was charged with 12 felonies and a couple of gross misdemeanors, but she had the plea deal of the century. Um, she let it down to attempted sexual assault and attempted lewdness with a minor underneath the age of 16. The judge didn't even give her back-to-back sentences. The judge allowed her to serve both terms concurrently. So she's spent uh, when was she arrested? I would say maybe January of 2015. She got out in October of last year. Okay. Her term expired. Um, and basically, I was given a choice. And this is what the Board of Parole Commissioners said. So I went before them and I said, look, I think we really need to extend this. The youngest sibling that's living isn't even 18 yet. This is still going to have a direct impact on him. And we were questioning his health, my father's health. And so I made a speech and I told them I believe that she needs to be kept incarcerated. But I was informed that there was a new bill passed where she doesn't have to serve out the maximum of her sentence because she's going to be on lifetime supervision. So they lessen those penalties. So she's still going to have to report being a sex offender for over 25 years. So they basically said, well, why have that person still be in prison? It was a prison overcrowding bill that the state legislator passed a couple of sessions ago, and they let her out. So the question was, do we want her on probation or not? That was the choice because either way she was getting out, was what I was told. And that was thanks Board of Parole Commissioners. I know it's not really your jurisdiction, but at the same time, like, okay, I was never even given an avenue to even ask for a broader appeal or anything like that. They said, well, we can't do anything, so sorry. At least point me in the right direction because I'm sitting here, telling you all of this stuff, and this just isn't about me anymore. These people willingly lied about my younger brother's medical history, and I need to protect that. He's young and impressionable and wouldn't know what to do if he saw her on the streets. That's not fair to him. How is that keeping the community safe?
So I wanted to kind of to get a little focus on this. So when did you start thinking that your brother might actually be your son?
It was weird at first. Okay, so it was different because whenever I walked in the room when he was first born, obviously it was usually a hodgepodge of us. We all went to the doctor at the same time, all four of us kids. It was just one appointment and go. We tried to keep it as simple as possible. So it was like bringing a small platoon anywhere. But doctors early on would make comments, and that was weird. Or they would linger and say, "Wow, he looks a lot like you." And I was like, "Okay, that's a little different." And that stuff started to build up, right? And then, uh, young teenage years, 16, 17, I'm like, "Okay, he's really looking like me now." So he's 4 or 5 years old at this point. And then my therapist was the whole house's therapist, practically. A strong fella that was over there at Neubauer Mental Health, and he saw my father. He didn't like my mother, so he didn't see her. I'm sorry for laughing, but uh,
I guess who could
like,
blame him?
right? But when he saw my other siblings, and then he saw me, and no offense to my brothers, but I was his favorite, and he asked me after she was sentenced. He's like, "Is there a possibility, dude?"
And especially with his developmental delays and physical issues, that indicates, this is a genetic set of circumstances he has going on. And what we know about families that procreate with close relationships is that children are born with a lot of disabilities.
Well, it really hit different when he asked me. He said, "Is there any way that he could possibly be your son?" And I said, "Ryan, I can't honestly answer that question. I don't know."
And what did that feel like? How did that hit you? Had that been something you'd ever thought of before that moment?
No, and it was like, I hate to sound so cliche, but it was like Stone Cold Steve Austin, the glass shattering. Like, I was like, "Oh," like it connected the dots. And I said, "Well, I can't honestly answer that." And that's where this quest really began. But the straw that broke the camel's back, well, let me preface this. So that's when I started to think about it. And I had asked my father several times before the coma, before all of this. And I think I had even approached you, Jack, at some point, and I had gone and purchased a test, and I had, approached him, and I got told to go myself.
Been there.
And right, so, um, well, then on top of that, though, and I said, "Okay." So I started to think about what all my options were. So I called the lab on the back of this test, and they said, "We don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole," because the case was already over and done with. And then I started to question, well, why wasn't a test given to me then? I'm 17, 16 at the time. I don't know what's available and what's not available. And I come from the most poor of poor. Poor of poor, where we had to share toothbrushes, you know, dirt poor. And at the time, I was halfway educated, sure, but I didn't know that, to ask for one. And I think it should have been incumbent from the very beginning, because if I were a woman and I would made that assertion, I think there would have been no question that that child would have been genetically tested or not.
You're absolutely right.
And it's a tragedy, and it hurts me. It hurts me on a physical, visceral level, because I grew up loving the idea of the United States, because civics was my savior. I threw myself into politics. I was 12, 13 years old, trying to read my first Bill O'Reilly or Bob Beckel book. And I believed in this idea of the American dream, and that you can work hard and come from the gutters and make anything happen. And to watch that system fail you.
Okay, so where are we today? You had court today, right?
Yeah, so we were in front of Judge Ochoa in the family court today. And I tried to stand back, and the idea at the time was to watch closely enough because I don't know when my father's going to die. My father is not in good health. He went from 450 pounds to being a medium with they're trying to amputate his leg. He has MRSA. He's skin and bone. He does not look well, and he's in rough shape. So I was trying to let him feel like he was in control, but I was guiding him, because I don't know how long he has left, and I was trying to do the right thing by him and not trying to it up for the other one either, because that's life shattering stuff if you try to go and fight it. So I went to my attorney Tim Treffinger, and I also consulted with a dear friend of mine, Dr. David Snipper, who's a registered anesthesiologist and general medicine guy out here. And he's the one that started to help me get back on track with my health records after being a product of Munchausen. So I want to say thank you to Dr. David. And my attorney and I sat down and I was like, well, what are my options here? This is what I know, and this is what I know to be true. And what can I do about it? And my attorney said, well, you have a hell of a case in paternity court and it's not as backed up. So we went and filed the paperwork late in December, but because of the holidays and everything, nobody had gotten served until January the 20th. So keep in mind, I'm still hyper vigilant at this point. I have a secret line of communication with this child right at this moment in time. I'm checking on him daily, and we had several things in place if it were an emergency. But on January the 20th, both of my parents received service of my petition. My father immediately started spiraling, called the National Suicide Hotline, and did not react well. So we placed the young boy in other families' cares over that duration of about a week. Once everybody's emotions simmered, I had agreed to meet up with a mutual family member to get temporary guardianship of the child. Uh, and we had a little note that isn't worth anything, but we had some boundaries set up and a cool down period. And then he didn't know, but I had called Child Protective Services to initiate a case as well. And Child Protective Services not only began the investigation, but called adult services as well, because there was evidence that my brother was administering medication to my grandmother, who's doing in home hospice. And I don't think a mentally disabled child or a woman who's going through in home hospice should have a mentally handicapped person administering their medication.
I agree
So
with you 100%.
You have systemic failure all over the place.
All over the
Logan.
place, man.
So with all of that, I mean, it was kind of a bait and switch to get the temporary guardianship, but we did it. Um, in regards to the hearing today, Ted did not respond and actually defaulted, and yet was still given the opportunity to be present in the courtroom. And I understand, but he actually clearly didn't have an opinion, because if he did, he would have responded. And he was there pro se representing himself. My mother appeared over Zoom, and Ted tried to contest the DNA test, saying that that he raised this child and that there's no rhyme or reason to um, to have this DNA test done. And the whole baseline is what my mother went to prison for. And I think it's unfortunate, like I said, because he's still denying any of that stuff ever happened. And I have never contested or tried to claim that he touched me in any facet, because it just didn't happen. This sort of stuff ruins people's lives, and I understand that, and it's heavy. But at the same time, when you stand in the way of someone who's, I don't want to say as helpless as my brother, but who needs assistance to advocate for himself, and he deserves to have the genetic truth, and that's at the core of this. This was sure, if we could get any sort of policy reform along the way, that'd be great. Because I don't think any child or a male survivor should go through what I've had to go through in this process.
I agree 100%. So what happened in court today?
Judge Ochoa did order that court administered paternity test. And he encouraged those that did not file a response to file a response so they could have judicial bearing at the next hearing. And we're going to go take that test. Unfortunately, there was no proper paperwork at least initiated in extending the guardianship as it stood. I just wish that it would have been granted on the spot. But we're going to file that motion as well to be sure that he continues to be with me, because I'm still technically in legal limbo. Because when my guardianship paperwork expires in July, what do I do? Return him back to him?
Right.
Yeah, you can't.
What's your recourse at that point?
Yeah, you can't do that.
So I am tired of the system making me stand here as a eunuch. I'm sorry, but that's what it feels like. It feels like I've been emaciated at every turn. And, as someone that is attempted to be as well versed in state statute, I mean, I've won 17, 18 elections in this state. And at 26, I'm getting ready to amend the Nevada state constitution if my ballot initiative passes again in this upcoming 2026 election. And yet I still find myself pigeonholed. And that's a tragedy. And now as a society, we wonder why men don't speak up. If we oftentimes ever question why male survivors don't speak up, is look at the dances that I've had to do here tonight, guys.
This is how change happens, Logan. That one person decides that this is enough and it's not right and starts the ball rolling. And so, yeah, we have a lot of respect for you coming on here, telling your story, bearing your soul to us. Why don't you tell us what brought you to the Fronczak Files?
Well, Jack had asked if there was any way that he could be of help. And I said, well, you know what, buddy? I hadn't actually put two and two together. And, it was a really easy decision to make. And quite honestly, I can't thank you guys enough for having sent the test, because it's going to give us not only a certain peace of mind for and I, who didn't ask for any of this, but it's going to give medical clarity. And it's going to empower him to live a fully fulfilled and fruitful life. Because if it does come back this way, is it tragic? Yes. Yes, it is. But at least now he can have a healthy answer, and he can get the help and services that he needs.
And so can you.
Well, yes, me too, as a male survivor, sure. But at the end of the day, this was always about well-being, because I felt my biggest point of contention was that we didn't tell the truth from the beginning. Screw your ego, screw your pride. And yes, I understand it's embarrassing to sit here and say, well, yes, my wife did math while she was pregnant with my child. Sure, that sucks. But it's the truth, and it happened. And doctors need to not be lied to in order to best serve this child. What did he gain from that? Reputation? Pride? It's gone now. If you could have just done right by him from the very beginning, we wouldn't be here.
The good thing is that we are here at this point, and you're doing something. You're trying to make a change, right? You're standing up, and you're gonna get answers. And I'm glad that we're able to help you with that, because that's what the Fronczak Files is all about. We're here to help people. And once you get this answer, at least you know what the truth is. You can take that information, you can move forward with it, and you can make it a better life for you and for him.
Well, yeah, I think it's such an interesting concept, right? And this sense of self, and how easily or how curious it could be that one lie can throw off someone's story, or not being able to stand here and tell the truth. I think every person needs to have a sense of self, and that's what was taken away in this situation, was that um, he couldn't advocate for himself at the time, and neither could I, and that robbed us of having more sense of clarity. And every human's entitled to that, and it takes great courage, especially like Miss Tracy and you here, Jack. Like, you guys are the standard bearers. You guys are running with the torch and forcing all of us to have this conversation, regardless of the uniqueness of it. And I want people to at least know, because I think my story is a bit of an extreme, but I think all cases in this realm are a little bit of an extreme because they're so individual and unique. And when I really read your second book, I walked away thinking, wow, this is incredible. Never before or never again would this person's genetic code be here. And it tells that story, and it's actually quite fascinating, whether it's medical stories like my younger brothers or like yours, where it's more dramatic and you had no idea where you really came from. So really, I think all of us should be thanking you guys for standing here and being the inquisitors and the truth seekers and these pace setters in this department, because a lot of people didn't know where to turn, and you're creating that. You're creating a resource. So thank you for even being able to help me.
Thanks, Logan. So I have to ask you now. So once we get the results back from the DNA test and you actually know what direction you have to go in, is that going to be a relief for you?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I don't know, right? Because it's like there's really two frames of mind here. The easy answer is, unfortunately, if it comes back positive, because that means I get placed on the birth certificate and that's that.
Does that give you any of the rights of a parent then, since if you're proven to be his biological father?
It would. Yet, yes, it would. Yes, it would.
And that would take care of the guardianship problem.
But then, you also have to look at it as the other flip side of that is now I know he's the product of that.
And one of the things I think that brought you to us was this whole court process. As we know, the courts don't do anything fast, as we know. And so today you were just given the order to have the DNA test done. So it's not done yet. And then you need to wait for the appointment to be made for you to go and get it done. Wait for the months it could take possibly for that result to come. Sure.
It's probably a 2-year backlog on getting results.
And you would be waiting for those answers. But when you reached out to us, and we told you that you send in the test, we can have your answers in a few weeks, and we can help you stop this merry-go-round and help you get a grip on where you're at and what the truth is.
Well, he's actually asked quite a bit about it because I told him what it was, and he's ready for this circus to be over too. And then he just wants to move on. I mean, guys, he went from being gray and pale and wanting to die to running for jobs for Nevada graduates, which is a club at one of his schools. He's running for president, and he made student of the month, and he's having fun, and he's playing with his wrestlers, and we play video games, and he's happy. So he's not only getting answers because of you guys, but he's smiling now because we're one step closer to figuring out the truth.
That's fantastic.
It's a relief not only for him, but I'm still working on how to accept, hearing my friends and family cheer that it's coming back as a positive test, though, if I'm being honest, guys. And that's a peculiar feeling. Obviously, it's the path of least resistance right now, but it is a weird thing to sit here and celebrate the fact that my brother could be my son because of the product.
He's going to have a good life because you're a great guy, and you're going to make sure that he gets everything that makes his life, the best. So it's going to be a win-win.
No, I know it's going to be a win-win, and I know that, but at the same time, it's just a peculiar feeling, and I wouldn't be giving you guys an honest show or telling you an honest answer if I said it any other way. It's just a weird question that's still a little lingering, and that's okay, because it's at least showing that we have enough mental fortitude in my family to sit here and compartmentalize it and look at it from every person's perspective, right? Think about it. We don't get to sit here and define when we accidentally hurt somebody else's feelings. If somebody comes to you and says that they were hurt, we can't say, well, I didn't hurt you. Well, no, we may not have intended to, right? But so and it's through help of therapy and the Fronczak Files team, my attorney, Dr. David Snipper, my attorney, Timothy Treffinger, great guy, solid lawyer. He specialized in family court and sexual misconduct cases when he worked for the Nevada State Attorney General, and I'm honored to have a guy of his caliber on my team. So thank you to him for picking up the case. But no, that's where we're at right now. I mean, I would welcome you guys back to get a reaction when we get the results and to talk about it and what the next steps are. Uh, I want to keep you guys apprised of everything that I'm doing because I couldn't have been here without you, your team, your resources. I did my best with the family search and all of the indexing that the LDS Church did, and combining what I did with my ancestry DNA and my family tree after I read your book, Jack. But I told her, I was like, I'm no expert, so I can't wait to be shocked if I was wrong because I'm so excited to learn what's next.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm glad I know you, and your story it's beyond fascinating. And all we want at the Fronczak Files is for you to have a happy ending, and for you and your family to just live a good, healthy life. That's all we ask for. So we'd love to have you back once you get the results, and hopefully we'll get to do that in real time. That'd be fantastic.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. And for those that are listening, I just want this to be a laudatory story. I want this to be an uplifting one. I don't want this to be, trauma bonding or anything like that. Yes, it is crazy. Yes, it is outlandish, but it does show that there is a road to recovery after it. I didn't let my abuse or my abuser or the failed systems prevent me from getting married or, being an expecting father. With proper help and resources, you can get to that point. And, I welcome people to interact with me. I got a couple of social media pages that are up there telling our story. I'm calling it Survivor in Sin City for right now. But, it's to the male victims that are out there, keep fighting the good fight. I mean, you can come forward and there is strength and vulnerability. There is help out there, and I hope to be an active participant in conversations in days to come. I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Monica Larson, Henderson City Councilwoman, doing a educational seminar on predator profiles and things like that. So I'm already trying to step foot into having an active voice in this community and to bring about change because, we deserve that. And, this has been my stand, but let's make it ours.
And Logan, the good thing is by sharing your story, if you can inspire one person to come forward and start their own journey, that makes all the difference. And that's why we do what we do. Thanks for being on the Fronczak Files, Logan. I look forward to the next chapter.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Next week, we pick up where we left off. In part 2, Breaking the Silence, A Brother's Burden, we dive into the DNA, the methodology, and what the results may mean for Logan, his family, and his future. You are not alone. If you've been affected by sexual abuse or trauma, support is available 24/7. Call 1-800-656-HOPE or chat anonymously at rainn.org, RAINN.org.